Well, as you prepare for a little break here, I want you to think about the next team project, which I'm giving you a little bit more leeway in the design of it. But in order for you to have your choice of what you want to do, you need to submit a proposal for your team project number 2. So if you look at the description of it, you can find it there in the class assignments section. Propose a graphical project. Since we're doing graphical things now from chapter 6 now to chapter 12, if there's something that you think you would like to write this type of program, I would like you to also mix up your teams a little bit. You can discuss among yourselves. If you're having trouble kind of finding a team, you're a little too shy, I can help just assign you to a team. And remember, with your teams, if you want to be efficient, talk with your team members about what your role is on the team. And also use GitHub. GitHub is going to be required in the 3rd project, so start getting used to using it. Right now, you know how to import from a GitHub link. You're going to have to learn, and we'll spend some time in class here learning how you can create a project of your own in GitHub, share it with others that can also download, change code, and commit it back up to your GitHub project, so then you can actually work together modifying the different pieces of the code and practicing that very critical point of communication on a team. If you don't communicate on a team, you're not going to get very far. And learning the communication is not that hard as long as you basically just keep others updated what you're doing, ask questions of your team members. So over the Easter break here, think about what you might want to do, discuss with your team members. If you already think that you want to go with the team, I try to mix up a little bit from what the teams were before, like I said. But think about that and think of a graphical project that you would like to do. Could be a little game, might demand a little bit more learning, such as basically with games, it's all the same kind of graphical things we're learning here in chapter 12, but with an added timer that every time a timer clicks, you do your animation, then move the little character across the screen in the direction he's traveling, move the little ball that's bouncing, whatever your creativity comes up with. Oh, we marked you absent, sorry. So we're just talking about the team project number 2 that we're going to be starting to think about. But today, just want to get you thinking about that. But we're going to spend some time now doing the graphics. And I want to show you what I've done for you. I think you might like this. For chapter 12, there's lots of... Chapter 12 is a thick chapter, so don't take too long to get into the work on chapter 12. And in the assignment for chapter 12, where is the assignment for chapter? There you go. Chapter 12 exercises. Down there in chapter 12 exercises, I have given you a link to a GitHub project that I have been working on as I've been working through the chapter, because the chapter talks about applets, and applets are dead. Sadly, applets are dead. So some of those projects that were given in applet format, I converted to a JPanel instead of an applet. And I will demonstrate that. What you can do here, go to that project, you can right-click, copy that link, copy link address when you're down there in chapter 12 exercises. I've assigned 17, 19, and 23. I'm going to spend a lot more time on 19 today because 19 has to do with a lot of designing. But let's just see what that GitHub project looks like. As I have I didn't download it. I went underneath File, and then I did an import. And under the Git section of the import, I did an import of a project from Git, then I did next, and I did clone URI, then I did next, and because I had copied that link in, it automatically shows up in the location. You don't need to enter user and password because it's public. You can enter user and password, but it doesn't make any difference. If I had made you a contributor to that project, having the user and password would let you actually commit later if you made some changes. And so that's the cool part of GitHub, is it's a great place for you to learn how to collaborate with projects. The hardest thing about collaboration is not stomping over each other's changes. So you have to communicate, I am modifying this module. Even put your name in the module just to make sure. You modify only your module. Once you have it, I'll show you how it works if you own a project. But once you download that, import that, you'll have all this wonderful code available to you. And let me close some things here. I've been looking at that project. And I'm hoping to catch up on all those projects over Easter here. You guys just do so much work that it's hard for me to catch up. Here's the pizza one I'm going to be working on. And look at this project here. It's over here in C12 examples. I've made lots of modules, starting in the 12.3 draw text example. I'll start with that one. I'll step through, and then finally we'll go look at the exercise 19, start of that. But each project, if you double click on the tab for your file, it brings it up full screen. This is a simple project that is introduced in chapter 12. And I've done basically everything that is here is a J-frame. Every example I've made into its own J-frame. And over in the main program, the main routine, all I do is set the visibility of each of those J-frames to true. Now, of course, I could just set the constructor to have it set itself to be visible. But I thought I'm going to have some control here from the main program. And that brings three concepts here that I want you to we'll start focusing on more as we build user interfaces with code. There is the controller. Think of this as my, kind of like the main, I'm using main. It shows windows. And then the windows or dialogues. It turns them, sets them visible. Call that our controller. It kind of is in charge of, hey, I'm starting the program. It creates the windows, connects the action listeners between the objects. Then you've got the view. That's your GUI parts. Display the GUI. You've got your different radio buttons. You've got rectangles around it. You've got labels about them, the pizza flavor or size, etc. You've got your graphical user interface. We call that the view. But when I click on this radio button and the others turn off, or when I click on a button that says submit my order, the action that happens is controlled by the model. The model does the stuff, does actions. Like submit the order, send an email, save to file, read from database. 3 words to remember. And you'll usually hear them in this order. Model, view, controller. MVC, a very common, what they call a paradigm, planning your code, keeping these sections kind of logically separated. And if you're really a model view controller, you will have all of this in separate modules, separate files. All the GUI stuff is in one Java. It does nothing to read from files. The controller gets the model and view, knows how to tell the model and view how to talk to each other. But in the pure model view controller, the view knows nothing about the model. It just knows my GUI should look like this. And when I click on a button, I'll call an action listener that the controller has told me to call. The controller sets up the connection between the view and the model. And what actually happens is the controller, the view knows how to talk to the controller. The model knows how to talk to the controller. The controller says, okay, view, you just clicked on a button. I'll tell the model to do what needs to happen when that button is pressed. So we're going to be thinking about that as we create our GUIs. Okay, so back to here. This being the controller part of our program, it turns on or off all the various examples. And as I worked through examples and I got tired of seeing 1,000 windows showing up, I just commented them out. Go ahead and import that, and go ahead and you can uncomment out all those other J-frames creating these. And I'm going to do that right now, just so you can see all of them in their glorious splendor. And see that, yes, they all work. Yes?
As you know, I did mine live.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the one, the rest I need to get. Do you want me to take?
No, you're fine. Yeah, you got these working. And you got the pizza one all the way, because that's a little more involved. And I was going to... Good. So you can critique as you... I'm planning to actually use the designer in Eclipse to start getting used to that as well. So I'm commenting out all those examples. Now I'm going to go ahead and run it just to see what in the world will happen if I create all those objects. I run it and I get all these windows appearing. One, because it pops up a dialog, stops everything. Once I click OK, then it continues and creates everything else. And there's my start of the pizza shop, problem 19. So you actually have, well, I don't think I have not yet committed this entire pizza shop. We're going to be working on that today. But all the other examples are here. Oh, and I forgot that all of them are set. If I close them, the whole program exits. So I don't want to close any windows, because if I close one window, the program exits. So I'm going to minimize that one. Here's in each of these examples, as they got created, they sit on top of each other. Some of them aren't doing anything. This one, if I type a character, it shows up in the window, just as the example shows in chapter 12. So these are all examples right from the reading. There is the source code available, but I thought I'll help you out and just have them available as I'm making sure that they work, and this whole making sure that I can go from an applet to an actual J-frame. These should all work for you. Now, one problem with this one is it doesn't say much what to do. Anytime you have a GUI, you should have something explaining what to do. But since these are examples from the book, we don't worry about it. But in a real program, you always want some kind of instruction, at least in the title bar. And there's some... Yeah. Or you have a nice label at the top that says, here's what this program does, and then goes on. Now, the more in-depth programs will have a question mark help on every page, and that's something that you'll plan for. But so all the examples in chapter 12 are here, and this one, it's testing mouse actions as my mouse comes in. If I hold my mouse down, it's keeping track of the events happening with the mouse, and chapter 12 explains each one of these. So this is the kind of thing that this will all do. Now, I can go play with each one, but I'm going to go back now, close that, and close all of them. Let's look at the code piece by piece, just so you can kind of see what's happening here. There's the main. Oh, let's go back to the main. Here's the main. All it does is display each one of those J-frames, one by one. And you can comment them out if you don't want them displayed. This is my controller. Let's look at the next example. And as I was working with them, I got a little bored having it be exactly the same. If But here's what I did when I actually made them. After getting one to work, I started just making a copy. You can actually copy a module to another one. It will rename your class for you. You can do a copy and a paste, Control-C, Control-V, or right-click, copy, right-click, paste, and it will make a new module. And let's jump ahead to this Draw Shapes. There's my Draw Shapes. Double-clicking on the tab shows my code. I started getting tired of having to change my title each time. And I discovered that just with a little exploration of the get class, that I can actually get the name of my class and have that display on the title. Rather than having to remember, okay, this has this name, I can just get the name of my class right there and put it in my title bar. And I had this set up for everyone. Now this particular one, all the graphics are being done on a J panel. And I'm creating a J panel as a class down here. And this has all this code that in the book was an applet. All that code I put into a J panel. And we learn in this chapter that the paint method is the method where all the work happens when I'm doing graphics in with all the control over what I want to do. If I'm just doing buttons and text boxes, I can just create objects and have them be added to my container in the J-frame. But if I want to do fancier graphics, changing colors, having characters appear when they type, having little spaceships fly around on my screen, I can make buttons move around on my screen, but it's more fun to be able to draw them yourself and have cool graphics. So in order to do all those graphics, I need to do that in the paint routine, the paint method of my J panel. Some of you I've been seeing in your code, you use override in front of methods. Does anyone know why we put override there? Why is override good to use? And I don't remember if they covered this in Java 1. What's the point of override? Okay, it informs us that this is an override, but it even does more than that. Kind of. It not only tells you that this is overriding, but if you don't call it exactly with the parameters that the override is expecting, it will cause an error. So it's making sure that your override is using the exact same method. So say I'm thinking this is an override, and I think, oh, I thought paint took another parameter, like container. If I do that, it'll tell me, wait a minute, it's not overriding the correct procedure. So override is helping to keep you from saying you're doing an override that's really not there. So the override is a safety feature, making sure you are exactly overriding the correct thing. You could write the code without override here, and it won't complain. But having it there makes the compiler check, yes, you are overriding paint, which is expecting only one parameter. So it's a great thing to use to make sure your code is overriding correctly. So I try to be diligent in using that. And if you see override and then put override there and then get an error, then you know, wait a minute, I'm not overriding it correctly. And you can look in the parent class to see what that's about.
You can override a method without
Right, as long as that override it's not expecting parameters in the parent class. Yeah. It's always, this is saying it has to be exactly like that method as defined in the parent class. You can always make a method that's different, additional to the parent class, but when you're overriding it, it has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, it's not a valid override, and it will tell you, and it generate that error. Now, remember, whenever we're painting, whenever we're overriding the paint, and I put this in some of them, I put in comments, let the parent do its work. the parent does some painting for us, and we don't want to have to redo all of what the parent does. So in Paint, we are always very diligent to call super.paint. And now we do our drawing. And this one is the more sophisticated one of the examples in the chapter. They declare all their variables relating to the shapes above here. And I didn't change at all the coding style of that programmer. Normally, though, if I don't need it to be a global variable, I'll just declare it when I use it. But this person wrote all the definitions or declarations of the variables. Do you notice anything missing here? It should be green. I'll give you a clue. There's not enough green here. When you declare variables, you should at least make a little comment what this means. Sometimes, if it's a very short piece of code, it's real obvious. But you cannot generate too many comments. I'd like to see more green in your code. And even in this last project, some of you did not have any green at the top explaining what this program is. Be sure to always have some green comments at the top explaining what this is. And like this part here, it would be nice to have some explanation. I'm not asking you to do this in this code. This is all just for example for you to follow. But if you're writing code like this, declaring variables, you should be having a short explanation of what shape is going to be used for. And I can look down in my code and figure out shape. And let's see if we can figure out what shape is. Oh, here. Shape is being assigned a random integer. Okay, and then based on, yeah, the terms. So up here they should have put something like used to generate or to determine what random shape. Remember, as you're declaring your variables, you're not only declaring them for someone reading your code, but for you to be reading your code in about a month. When you've gone on to a harder project and someone comes up to you and says, I've been using your program, could you explain what's going on here? And you look at it and you have to stare at it for a half hour until you remember what you did. Putting comments there, sometimes the name of the variable explains a lot, like num of figures. But x, it seems like, okay, that's somehow going to be used somewhere to determine the location of things. But a comment along these variables would be very helpful.
I've always struggled with comments. I didn't know what it was like.
Yeah.
And declaring variables on my top already knows what the variable means. Should I say, oh, I'm declaring
right.
variables now? I've always struggled with comments.
If it's a pretty short piece of code, there's not much to explain. You might just say global variables used throughout or something. Concentrate on the ones as you look through them thinking, okay, what is this going to be used for? Int red. Is that the red component of a color? That's I'm sort of guessing. And let's see if I get down there. Oh, look, it's the red component. Well, at least they put the comment here. And sometimes you might just say, see below, used for color determination. So then we see what he's doing here. We let the parent do its work. We decide how many figures we're going to be drawing. So we add 5. So we're going to have a minimal of 5 figures to draw. And then a random, remember random returns 0 to 1 to 10. So I could put a comment here. It's going to be 5 to 15 based on this formula. And I'm hoping by now you'll recognize this code. Okay, so all these examples I've given to you, read through the chapter 12, and you can always come back to here and modify this code if you want to just understand what it is. Okay, that's it for just that example. That's available for you to read through. If you want to review anything in the chapter, you can come say, hey, Mr. Manning, he messed up. This isn't working exactly right. I broke something. I want to go jump ahead to exercise 19 because
Or in
Yeah, this isn't GitHub. I'm not going to put the pizza one in GitHub because that's something you have to build, but I'll show you how I'm building it. I've given you the start of it. Now, here's the thing with, if you want to use, with the pizza one, I'm going to actually use the designer that Eclipse gives us because that's a lot of nice things available to us. It's not quite perfect though, and we'll see as we do this. And in order to make this, you have to make it from inside of Eclipse. I tried it by hand. I could not get the designer to show up. And if I look deeper, I could probably find where I can manually make it show up in the designer. But if you want to actually design the GUI from Eclipse, here's what you can do. I'm just going to show you from the start, and then I'm going to come back to the pizza one that I already have started. You can go up here in the menu, create new visual class, and come down to swing, and I can create a J-frame from there. What this does is Eclipse builds in everything that I know how to use a J-frame, plus it adds some more things to it. Watch what happens. I'm going to click a J-frame. I'll give it a name. I'll just call it a temp example. Well, it creates a temp example J-frame. And now that I've done this myself, let's see if we can understand what Eclipse has done for us. It gives a main in that J-frame that I just created, even though I'm not planning to be using it. But it looks like it creates a constructor for it, and I can put in comments. I can always modify this. I'm not sure how much of it will be rewritten if I modify it. I'll just put constructor here. And in case I add more code, I want to see the end of the constructor. Very helpful to keep track of what my brackets are. And this is what Eclipse has done for us. Notice we don't have to write any of this code. Eclipse did this, and we start to recognize this. There's the exit on close. There's my setting some default size. And look at that. It makes a JPanel, setting some borders, and assigning the default border layout instead of the grid layout we've been doing. And Chapter 12 talks about the multiple layout managers available to us. And I've used those. I have examples there. And then they set the content pane. Look at that. I can set the content pane instead of doing a get content pane. I can make my content pane on my own. Well, I'm learning things just by seeing what Eclipse does for me. But here's the cool thing about Eclipse. I can come down here now. In the lower left corner, I see a source and design now because I made it in Eclipse. Now I have a GUI Designer available to me. This is a powerful thing now. I can design my GUI from this little menu that pops up. And it takes a little while getting used to this. What I'll typically do when I'm just first using this, I'll make a component of everything available to me and just to see how they work. But let's just kind of start thinking about our pizza project, which is going to look something like, where is it? It's going to look something like this. Our pizza style shop, we're going to build a GUI like that. And as I looked at that assignment, I thought, that's going to be a pain to adjust. And it's about time we learn to use the Eclipse Designer anyway. So I'm going to show you how I would design this using the Eclipse Designer. You don't have to use the Eclipse Designer. If you already are happy with generating check boxes that the chapter discusses how to do, create text boxes, put them in the right or check boxes, put them in the right place, radio buttons, get them to group together. That's the little trickier part. Eclipse does that for us. A button, we know how to create buttons. This is a little sloppy design. Things aren't quite lined up. You're welcome to improve on this design, but have the general layout be the similar layout. Okay, so I have that in mind as I then come to Eclipse and want to design this. So first thing I'm going to do is, without even worrying about all the code that happens, I'm just going to get the GUI to look right. And then I'll come back and get the code to work. Question?
No, I think you start with the layout.
Yeah. And I'm going to start with just the layout, the default layout. And if it doesn't work, I'll switch my layouts. So remember, you can decide what layout it is, and look at all the layouts available to you. And the way to set the layout, you can just click one and then come and click on the window, and it'll choose that layout for you. So I don't even know what it is. If I go back and look at the code, I can remember, oh yeah, they're using a border layout. Let's try using that. That's the default. And if it doesn't work, I can come back and adjust my layout. So let's just see how this works. I'm using the default one, and I'm going to have the 2 groups of 3 radio buttons. Well, to create a radio button, I click here and come over here, and oh man, I can see already. I'm not sure I like this layout. Yeah.
When I did it, the default layout was the width layout.
Yeah.
I had to change it to that.
I'm already seeing that. Wait a minute. I don't have much control over where I put things. I want to be able to put things just like on this picture here. So let's try the recommended from our consultant over here. Let's try absolute layout. I click absolute layout and just come over here and click on that. Now that has the absolute layout, and I can, I thought I could move that button. Oh, it doesn't let me move my button. Well, let's do an undo, Control Z, Control Z. And now let's set the absolute layout before we start laying out radio buttons in it. So I choose my absolute layout first. Now let's see if it's a little more flexible. Look at that. It lets me put my button anywhere I want. And let's see what the title of that is going to be. Small. Oh. If I forget to give it a title right now, this is where I can have it selected. I can go down to my properties window, and if it's not showing, you can go to the view and get your properties window to show up. And I can come here and type in the text and change that to be absolute layout.
No,
Well, I made a completely new one, a J-frame. I made a new swing J-frame at the start to create this. And I just called it temp example. But you'll probably want to call it pizza GUI or something.
No, talk about this program, this thing in Eclipse that you're using right now to make the GUI.
Oh, we call this the designer, the Eclipse designer. And it shows up, if I've made it, it'll show up down in the lower left. I can switch from the code view, the source view, to the design view, back and forth. I can view the code or the design, and I can flip back and forth between the 2 views of that same folder. So when I create it using this swing J-frame, it puts in the hooks in Eclipse to give me the capability of having a design view as well as a source view. If I don't have both a design and source view, that means I probably created it by hand, and Eclipse doesn't know how to connect the designer. And remember, when I'm doing this designer, it's actually creating little code pieces in there for me. So this I want to display small 650. Select that radio button I put in there, and I come now to the properties, text, and I select small $650. Hitting enter, it will have a radio button showing that. Now I can now duplicate that to the other ones. It's going to say medium, large. I can come over here, copy, and paste, and place it. And there's automatic alignings that come up and snap to good places to align. I'm going to go with the snaps. Click off of it and do another paste, control, there it is, and then align that one. And now let's have it say medium, $8.50, large, $10. Click on that one, come down to the text, medium, $10.50, and large, or sorry, $8.50 and large, $10. Correct that text, $8.50. Select on this one, large, change the text, large, $10.00. Okay, so that's done a lot of work for us. Now before going any further, let's get it to work. Okay, so now I can just do run, and if everything is done right, this should, well, does it appear? Will it appear? There it is. And that code already has set the problems for me. But I got a problem. Watch what happens. If I click a button, it turns on. If I click the other one, oh, it turns on. They're not working together. Now I could write the code to figure out when one's on, turn the other two off. When this one's on, turn all the others off. That would be a big pain, and because it's so common to do in radio buttons, our consultant has advised us, we need to group them. If you want to use Windows Builder, you can. It's a little different than the Swing Designer, but yeah, you can use Windows Builder. Oh, if you don't have, are we running out of time already? No, we're not. If you don't have Swing Designer,
This was an issue last time too.
okay, here's what you do. Let me quick show you that. That is in a video link at the top, but let me just show you how easy that is. You go into Help, Install New Software, and you go down to the Eclipse.org releases Oxygen, and then it will populate a list. You'll go under General, and you can add your Swing Designers. As the list will get populated, the download Eclipse.org releases whatever your release is. You may have a different release than mine. I have Oxygen. So whatever release you have, then once you select that, it will fill the menu. Take a little longer than it did for me at home with a faster internet connection. Underneath General, will appear all the things you can add to that, and one of them will be Swing, all the Swing elements. I was hoping this wouldn't take as long. It didn't take long for me. I don't know. Maybe our little firewall here is slowing us down. We better run a speed test next time. I'm on the wireless, so maybe there's a little slowness on the wireless. But anyway, underneath General, that will show up, and I don't think I can't get out of here and go back to my code and let this finish. Well, anyway, there's a video show. I'm going to cancel this. I want to get back to our code. But that's how you can add the other elements. Okay, to group this now, our consultant advised us, and the way to do it is I select that button, shift select the next button, shift select that one, and now I can right-click, and where is it? There, set button group. Right at the bottom. I can right-click, set the button group. If they're a group of buttons, then they will behave together. And because there are no button groups yet defined, I want to make a new standard button group. By just assigning a button group, by doing a set button group, now when I run it, I don't have to write any code. When I run it, they now will work as a radio button group. One gets selected, the others get turned off. If I actually want to see what code Eclipse generated for me, I can go to the source and see all the things that it's done to make it a button group. I could have done this by hand, and this is where I can actually learn how it's done. I can see now that I've done it myself. At some point, they made the buttons, and they've been adding it to a button group. Where do they define the button group? I gotta find where that is. They do a button group add, but I don't see where they've defined my button group. I was hoping to see that defined here. But anyway, I can see the code that it's been adding for me. But I don't have to worry about that. I can let the designer handle that. Now, one thing I found is back in the design here, I want a rectangle around this. The first time I was using button groups was in Visual Basic, and they actually have a graphical object, and I think even NetBeans does this, if I remember. You can actually draw a rectangle around a circle of buttons, or a group of buttons, and it actually has a label and will automatically group them. Under Eclipse, it's a slightly different technique. You have to select them and put them in a group. So this rectangle that's displayed nicely here, my plan is to draw that later. Using what I know how to do is do paint. So I'm gonna let Eclipse do as much as possible. But as far as I can tell, and I messed around with drawing a rectangle and putting it behind, it wasn't just coming out right. So I'm going to plan on drawing those rectangles later, not worry about it for now. But I will put the pizza size label there. And so I'm looking for a label. Oh, wait a minute, where's my labels? That workspace, when I was getting in my... Where is my label? Let's see here. I see buttons, text areas. Oh man, no label. Well, let's explore a little bit. We go down here, and finally down in the AWT components, there is a label. So now we're learning. There's swing and there's AWT. There are two different packages that give me similar kinds of graphical elements. And now, just to confuse us, how do I know when to select a swing button versus a AWT button? To me, in my simple graphical user interface, I don't think it matters much. As you get more complex, you may decide, oh, you know, it seems like the AWT works a little better. But for now, we'll go with swing unless we can't find it, and then we'll use it from the AWT. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a label, decide where it's going to be. It's going to be placed up there, and it's going to say, what's it going to say? It's going to say pizza size. And now while we're in properties, we do want that to be red. So down here in properties, I see I can choose my font and I can choose my foreground. All right, let's choose the font first. Let's make it a little larger and bold. And I see an example. I'll make that 16 size. See how that shows up. And click OK. Now to make it red, let's try the foreground color in the properties. And oh man, I've got so many choices of colors. I've got swing colors. I've got AWT colors. I've got system colors. Since it's a label, an AWT label, I'll choose an AWT color. But I bet you those others will work. Choose that color and click OK. And now, see how it looks here? Here's another thing that's a little irritating. There's my designer. Now let's run it. It doesn't quite look exactly the same as it's showing in the designer. It's not quite the same size. The font is not quite the same size. Things aren't fitting when I actually run it as they seem to be fitting here. So it's not quite a what you see is what you get. It's not quite WYSIWYG. It's close to what you see is what you get. I think NetBeans at this point has a better designer, but we're using Eclipse. So I'm going to come back and I realize I need to enlarge that in order for it to look nicer here. So I come back here and I simply enlarge it, knowing that when it really runs, it's going to fit. I can enlarge things all together by shift selecting multiple items. I can grab one item and enlarge all of them at the same time. And I can shift select all of those and realize I need to move them down. I can use my arrow keys to move them to a different spot. And so my arrow key wasn't working. I can grab them all and adjust that whole group together as I have them selected together. Remember though, you have to run it to be absolutely sure. What's that? Yeah. So it's not quite exactly what you see, but it's close. And it's a lot easier than having to manually read and write all the locations. We want to get used to this designer. It does a lot of nice things for us, especially when we do fancier controls like these little sliders and things. There's a lot of cool controls that are like built in. I want to learn how to use that and learn how to take advantage of what Eclipse does for me. What's that? Yes, this is being recorded because there's a lot of stuff here. All right. Let's do the others, and then we'll think about how we have to plan ahead when we actually want the button to do something. So let's now go ahead and there's that button. That's going to be my process selection. All right, select the button and then put it over here in the right place. Process selection. When I first create it, I can start typing what goes in it. Process selection. If I select off of that and I want to change it, I have to select the button and come over here to the text of that button and change it there if I wanted to change my text. I can come back here and adjust its size to get it to fit right and run. So change and run. See how it's decent location? Now these three, these grouped together, I want a very similar one over here. So rather than redoing all of that, copy paste. Shift select all of them, Control C, Control V, and move it to where I want them to appear, and then adjust their settings. Let's see what happens if it goes off the screen. Let's see how that appears before I adjust my screen size. No, it doesn't do too bad. A little bit pressed against the edge. So I'll come back here. I'm going to adjust my frame, make sure I have the right thing selected. Adjust that out a little bit. Run it again. Okay, and now I'll come adjust my text. So that's going to say pizza type. By doing this, I don't have to remember how to change the color again. I can just come down here and change that text to be pizza type. Hit enter, and automatically displays. And it's going to be thin crust, medium crust, pan. All right, hope you're seeing how this all works. Thin crust, enter, medium crust, and pan. And run. Ooh, not looking too bad. Let's get that big title across the top, and then we'll start. Well, then we're going to be out of time. So let's get that title across the top. Creating all these checkboxes, they're not too many. As I get lots of them, I might think, I'm going to put these in an array and do a loop. But for now, that's not too many. I'll still manually create these. All right, so let's get that big label. Make a J label, a AWT label. Put it up here. Adjust its size first. And it's going to say, welcome to Homestyle Pizza Shop. My text down, where's my, I have to have it selected. Yeah, there it is. Welcome to Homestyle Pizza Shop. Quick exclamation point, even more exciting. Adjust my font size to be nice and large, and it will give me an example as I draw that. I can come back and adjust that. And change my foreground. Oops. Change the foreground. Foreground. Why does it keep switching on me? Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, come back here. There we go. Change the foreground to color red. And it looks like that's a little short. Enlarge this height. And run. And we're not looking too bad. Oh, looks like I need to either decrease the size or make a larger window. I'll decrease the size. Come back here to my font. And bring it down to maybe 22. Even here, the size doesn't match when I run it. Looking a little better. I might make it a little bigger. Now, if you have this as a project that you're using in GitHub, watch what I can do. If I'm using GitHub, I can go down in, where's my, oh, I go to the source section, view my staging here, and I can stage it and do a commit and push, and it automatically shows up in my GitHub share. I can do the commit and push because I am the owner of this. If you own your own project, you can commit and push as your collaborator. All right, this will be uploaded, recorded in case you want to go back and view